Here's a question nobody's asking. Can you trust AI to help you build trust? Think about it. AI can research your customers, draft your emails, remember your follow-ups. But trust isn't about efficiency. It's about humanity. So where does AI actually fit? We brought that question to Charles Green, creator of the trust equation and one of the sharpest minds on what makes people believe in you. So Bill Gusmano and I spent 45 minutes unpacking how AI impacts credibility, reliability, intimacy, and self-interest. What we found was inspiring, surprising, and honestly reassuring. This is that conversation.
All right. Thank you all for joining us on this first episode of the Trust Algorithm. My name is Frederic. I am a co-founder of a company called Over the Line, and I'm joined today with two incredible people. We're going to be talking about what has become a very big topic whenever we engage with sales teams. So I'll let both Bill and Charles introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it.
I'm Bill Gusmano, co-founder, a company called the Motivated Mind Group. We focus on sales enablement and marketing.
I'm Charlie Green. I spent 20 years in management consulting and then co-wrote a book called The Trusted Advisor, which is probably my main claim to fame. I also wrote a book called Trust-Based Selling, and the last 25 years of my career have been built around trust in professional services and B2B sales organizations.
And thank you all both for your introduction. I think what was quite interesting, we've been having a few conversations with Charlie and Bill around what it means to think about trust in the age of AI when it comes to sales. And we were sharing earlier this idea of what does it mean to trust actually, and what does it mean to actually engage with customers in a more meaningful way. And I was quoting this other Charles, so not Charles Green, but Charles Feldman, who said that trust is actually choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable and making it vulnerable to another person's action. And we thought that it was quite interesting to actually kind of lead us into this conversation, because we're seeing a lot of this idea of how susceptible am I in the age of AI as a salesperson, whether working directly with a vendor or working for a partner, to deal with trust. And so one of the stories that we thought was actually quite interesting, I've been doing a couple of projects with customers recently, and what we see coming back quite quickly is this idea of what does it mean to be using AI when I engage with customers. I've been doing a few engagement with customers, and all the time salespeople get back to us, and they're either extremely excited or extremely worried about what does it mean to be working as a salesperson at the age of AI. So the question that kept on coming back in the conversation that we had with Charlie and Bill was actually this: can AI make salespeople more trustworthy, or does that undermine the whole engagement that we have with salespeople? Maybe Bill, if you have maybe a few comments about this.
Yeah, no, it's a similar engagement in recent workshops. You see it twofold, where people are embracing AI and sometimes taking it too far, where they just want AI to give them the answer and they don't want to think through it, just not use it as a tool to enhance what they do, but just give me as much as possible and give me the answer. And then others really steering away from it in a certain aspect, feeling that it's information that they're not comfortable with. They don't know how far to trust it. They don't know if they represent that information correctly, right? Are they worthy? Are they positioned with their client with that information? Will they still be credible? And so it's two different aspects: total embracing and then fearful on the other hand as well.
And maybe, Charlie, if you can give us a little bit of the background on how you came up with this idea of the trust equation and why this is so relevant today.
Good. Well, if you'll allow me a couple minutes, let me just give some big picture context on two items. One is trust and the other is sales and selling. And I recognize, the main topic here today is AI and trust and sales and what does that mean and what can we, et cetera, et cetera. But by way of background, first of all, I like the Feltman quote you mentioned. Trust means putting something you value at risk. He's absolutely right. If you think about trust, there are three aspects of trust, and people confuse them linguistically and therefore conceptually. But one is trust, the noun, the noun trust. It's the name we use for a relationship between two parties. We have a level of trust here. The second one is the verb to trust somebody. That's what Feltman is talking about. To trust somebody is essentially to take a risk, to make yourself vulnerable. And then there's trustworthy. How do I be worthy of trust? How do I get people to trust me? And that's where the trust equation comes in, which we'll get back to in a second. And then shift over to sales. Let me break that down real simple. To be really good at sales means two things. You're good at what you do or what you sell, and you're good at understanding what people need or want. And let's call those, competence and understanding your customers or buyers. And then you could go on and break it down further, but I think it's more interesting to say which is more important, which is in least supply, those kinds, and which should come first. And I'll give quick answers to those and we can dive in. Number one, I think the world in general is over-focused on competence and under-focused on understanding their customers. So the opportunity, to me, for salespeople lies in getting better at that side of it. Call it what you want, but understanding your customers, and that plays out as we'll talk about in trust. Another observation: sequencing. Generally, it's better to start with the technical stuff. Reputation, branding, competence, credentials, and then when you get in personal touch, dive deeper into the more emotional wants and needs and so forth. Anyway, with those two concepts as background, you asked about, the trust equation. And again, that's going into how do we be trustworthy.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's break this down. So you
break it
basically have four key components to the trust equation. Maybe if you can take us through these four components, and then we'll kind of interject as we see some interesting elements of the conversation that Bill and I have been having as well.
Yeah. What we call, or what I call the trust equation came out of that book I co-wrote called The Trusted Advisor. There are two facts. Actually, all models of trustworthiness have the same thing. They have at least one component of competence, capability, credibility, expertise, and they have at least one component of the more emotional side, the feelings, the vibes, and so forth. We have two of each. So the formula is credibility plus reliability. Those are the two technical ones. Credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, all divided by self-orientation. The intimacy and the self-orientation speak to the more emotional side. Credibility is competence, expertise. Reliability is track record. You do what you say you're going to do. Intimacy means, do I feel comfortable sharing stuff with you? Do you get who I am? You're not going to abuse my confidence. And in the denominator, which goes the other way, self-orientation. Who are you in this for? Are you constantly paying attention to yourself? Are you worried about your own sales goals? Because if you are, you'll kill trust. We buy from people who we think are actually in it to help us, and we're very suspicious, all of us naturally, that, is this person I'm talking to really care about me, or are they just trying to meet their monthly quota? It's a killer. So that's the equation, and you can get to, what are the pathologies that result if you're underemphasized on one, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the four anyway.
So if you could define or help define a little bit more what each of these components are. So if you think about credibility, what does it sound, or what does it represent for you?
Yeah.
What is it that you see in credibility?
This also gets us into AI because that's how mostly people think of it. Credibility is mostly, It's how many degrees do you have after your name, how many certifications, what's your resume look like, have you been around the track, do you know what you're talking about, have you written books, did you graduate from a prestigious institution? Credible, wow, I believe that guy, he's really smart, or he's really good at what he does. That's basically credibility. Call it competence would be another way to put it.
It's actually quite interesting, and Bill, feel free to barge in. But this whole idea of that very often we see salespeople kind of n- so we're kind of thinking about two different audiences here. You've got the more technical minded
Yep,
people, as you were saying, there's a very technical aspect to it. So do you really know what you're talking about? But
right.
also, do you know not so much the technical side of it, but exactly what you're talking about. It's actually quite interesting because it feels like as a salesperson, AI should actually be helping me quite a bit there.
Yeah,
And we see kind of a reluctance from salespeople's perspective in actually getting actively engaged with AI platform on basically building their own credibility. Like, can I
right.
actually demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about in a way which is differentiated? So,
Yeah,
I was just going to say, in all the workshops we've taught over the past 20 years, we all lead in with discovery and research.
right,
And that's to establish credibility, to make sure that you're knowledgeable and competent in the field in which you're speaking of with your own product, and where you start leading into your intimacy component, which is your customer's business. Do I have the right language to understand some of those components? And you see in the workshops them embracing AI with a great deal, because what used to take you many weeks and
right,
meetings with adjacent folks to get a better understanding about what's going on, you tip of your fingers, right? You can type in some prompts
right.
and get some great information. But what Fred's alluding to is, after you start scratching the surface with, like, most salespeople, you get to the second and third level question, and they start to get nervous and talk. Can you actually damage your credibility by going a little bit too deep with AI, where you're getting a little bit over your skis, right? So is this an area in which I should back off because I'm not credible, even though I have access to the information?
Yeah. There's a quick answer to that, and that's transparency. I mean, if you're honest about how you're using, I'll give you a good example. A good friend of mine, David Brock, just wrote a book through AI. He literally used Claude, Anthropic Claude, as a co-author. He credits him as co-author. There's a forward from both of them, and he did it based on 4,000 articles he's written over his career. But he's open about it. So right, you can't confuse him of trying to use it to fake how much he knows. That's the whole key. If you're honest about it and say, look, I used AI here and I know, personally, I don't know anything past this, but I've done this research. What do you think? And you engage in a dialogue. So it's actually, a problem of our own creation is when we freak out
mm,
about getting out over our skis and trying to look too smart. Just don't lie. Be honest about it.
mm.
I mean, everybody understands what it does. Everybody understands it hallucinates. We all get that. So be honest about it. No big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Well,
you find your customers are very receptive to the
Sure.
fact that you tried and did the research,
And by
and
the
tried to
way,
learn more.
interestingly, that's a deeper level of credibility. It's truth telling. It's not just competence, it's actually telling the truth. And
Mm.
and very disarming. One of the most credibility enhancing things you can say is, I don't know. Like, who's going to doubt you on that? Nobody.
mm,
You're on. Oh,
fair
good.
enough.
You're an honest man. You're not trying to BS me. Thank you. That separates you right there from 9 out of 10 salespeople who are trying to BS you and pretend that what they know is what AI knows, et cetera, et cetera. So set yourself apart. Be honest. Not that hard.
And so that takes us to this kind of on a sideway to this idea of reliability, which
Yes.
is now that you've actually established that you know what it is that you're talking about. So what am I supposed to be doing next? Like basically showing that not only do you know your stuff, but you can actually replicate, you can actually engage, you have
Right.
different kind of conversations. Maybe Charlie, if you can go a little bit into reliability.
Well, reliability is it's the simplest of the four components in a way. It just means, people get to recognize they can depend on you. You're going to do what you said you would do. You have a track record. You do to the best of your ability, you do exactly what you said you're going to do. You know that phrase, under promise and over deliver?
Right.
That's two lies put together. You're telling people. First of all, I'm not going to tell you what I'm really going to do. Second of all, I'm going to do more than I said. So
Mhm.
if you keep under promising and over delivering, after a while, people catch on to that. John Chambers, when he ran Cisco, they constantly underpromised to Wall Street and they constantly surprised Wall Street to the upside until Wall Street caught on to it and said, "Oh,
Right. Yeah.
we better deliver 3x, otherwise we know
Right.
you're
Right.
BSing us again." So,
It's
um,
2001. I need to do something about it.
yeah, yeah, right. So anyway, I think reliability is, in a sense, Bill, you're getting at, do I have mastery of this material? That's where AI, I think, can be very helpful if we use it as a collaborative partner. You say, play act with me, role play with me, or help me develop this hypothesis, shoot holes in this idea. Use it as a partner to make you better at that stuff. But it also goes to the point where I think, AI, or at least large language models, will never be able to do. All they can do is sum up what's been said before by other people. It's up to us to make connections that haven't been made before. See, there are limits to AI. So that's where, good old plain ability, ability to see patterns, ability to go where the conversation's going. That's not going to get replaced. And don't kid yourself. That's still human, and that's good news for all of us too.
I agree. One thing we've noticed or I've noticed at least in the workshops, and Fred and I have talked about, the thing that in the past 20 years was the most dreaded component of our workshops were role plays. And
Right.
lately, they're one of the most sought after and
Really?
engaging. Yep. The
Oh,
younger
great.
folks, especially technical and pre sales, they are getting introduced into customer conversations much earlier and take a much stronger role than in the past. You're
That's
seeing this
great.
trend that's happening, and they're very eager to practice conversations, which they really don't do on a typical basis outside
Right.
tactical to technical. And now they're being introduced to, in the B2B, especially in the IT world, into business conversations, and
Right.
they want to look credible. They want to practice because they haven't had these
Right.
conversations in the
Well,
past.
yeah, it's great for that, of course.
Yeah, and
And
you're seeing the leverage AI, but as you're talking about, the piece they can't get out of the language model is connecting all the dots and practicing a conversation that they may
Yeah,
not be in, answering a question that they've never heard before, that
I hadn't
or
heard
they're
that
not
trend.
used to hearing.
That's a very positive trend. I like that. By the way, the same guy, David Brock, that I mentioned, when he was playing around a year or two ago with models like this, he created a thing he calls the kitchen table. And it's you speak to the AI and you say, I'd like to talk about whatever. And you're allowed to pick three people anywhere, history, live, dead, fictional, that you want to have talking with you at the kitchen table. You can pick Socrates, Mother Teresa, and Albert Einstein, or pick people from the sales world, and you have a dialogue with them.
Mhm.
It's like role. That's wonderful. That's a great use of AI
Hmm.
to help
Yeah,
salespeople.
and actually, it's quite interesting because there's been a lot of conversations lately, but the fact that a lot of people are looking at AI and how to use AI the way you would use Google,
Yeah,
and just ask the question and then you will get the answer, which is
yeah,
actually not the way to converse. Like
right,
you want to have a conversation with
right.
something that will be coming back, which actually takes us quite nicely to the third component of your equation, which is around intimacy, and how do
Intimacy,
you
yes.
actually develop this intimacy by having the right conversations and really understanding what your customer is all about. So maybe if you can define a little bit, Charlie,
Yeah.
what you
And it
meant by
turns out,
that.
by the way, that intimacy factor, we had about 70,000 data points. About 500,000 people have taken an online self-assessment version of this trust equation. And when we got to 70,000, we did an analysis of the data, including a regression analysis to answer the question, which of those four factors is the most important? And you know what it was? It turned out to be intimacy. I kind of thought it would be self-orientation, It
Mm,
was
mm,
intimacy by a small amount. And so it's a very important issue and one particularly difficult for tech people, and especially typically difficult for people who are now in their late 20s, early 30s, or mid 20s, early 30s, who grew up, what John Haidt calls the anxious generation. They were
right.
overprotected by their parents, and then they were underprotected when the onslaught of of social media came on, and then they got hit by COVID when they entered the workplace. So they really haven't had much experience interacting with other human beings. So it's the most important thing in my work with clients. It's the one they get the least, the least good at. So it's a double whammy, and it's powerful. And it's again, intimacy basically means, do I feel safe and secure talking with you about stuff that I might not necessarily bring up to somebody else? That's what you want if you want to be a trusted advisor or a trusted salesperson, you want them to feel comfortable talking to you, sharing everything with you. Now, that means you got to be obviously, um, you got to be careful with, sharing people's confidentiality, that kind of thing.
Mm,
But it goes deeper than that. It's like, how do you make people feel that way with you? Well, one thing is you talk about them, not you. Another one is
right.
you talk about feelings and personal interests. And one thing I tell people, and they're amazed, especially tech people, wow is a full sentence. If you're talking with somebody and they say something and you just lean forward and say, wow, and put some facial expression. I mean, what a great way. It shows that you're interested. It's not about you. You're willing to go where they take the conversation. You're willing to move off your agenda and onto theirs. And you want to understand what they really mean. Not so that you can write it down on your list of, oh, there's a good product spec, we can now match up with that.
Right.
What you want to have is people feel that they've been listened to, that they've been heard, that they've been understood. We talk about listening. Listening plays here mainly into intimacy, but it isn't listening to find out the answers. It isn't even listening to confirm hypotheses or figure out new data. It's listening so that the other person feels heard. We're all human beings. I don't care how technical you are. The most technical people I've run into in my career are pretty simple people, and they still operate by human interactions.
On
They
a
may
human
be,
level.
yeah,
Yeah.
they may be, rocket scientists and all that, but they still, they're troubled by fears and lack of respect and being dissed, and they want to be, all that stuff that we all have. Everybody has it.
Right.
Mhm.
So, folk, it's not that hard to pay attention to them. Paying attention to people is maybe the single best thing you can do.
Interestingly, so I was having this exact conversation with a set of salespeople recently, and what most of them were it was actually quite interesting because they all recognized that this is something they must have, and they
Yeah.
all recognized that this is the place where they had the most deficiency.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
they did not know, and there were two levels of it. If I could. Uh, make it into a little bit of yeah, simplify it a bit. The left brain, right brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were quite good at the left brain part of it. Like I can read your annual report. I can actually
Yes.
go and understand what your boss is telling you. All this I can do. And then the right brain was the part where a lot of the salespeople we were talking to were like, I don't even know how to start dancing around this. Like
Right.
I do not know how to have that conversation
Right.
because
Right.
it's sensitive, it's potentially culturally, it's painful.
Yeah.
I can't even go there. So there were a
Right.
lot of
Yeah,
barriers.
we could go on and on about that,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
yeah.
hang up, the reason that people don't do it. But my experience has been the same as yours. People actually do know that, maybe at a
Mm,
subconscious level. But if you get them to talk about this, say, yeah, I do think that's important, and I do think I don't have it very well.
right,
So people kind
right.
of know that. They just don't know what to do with it, right?
I think that human component is what will always exist, right? No
Agree.
matter, the access to information, AI, automation,
Absolutely.
people want to simplify the process. That human interaction is key.
Absolutely. If people are going to drop $100,000 or $1 million on a sales thing, they're not going to do it without metaphorically looking somebody in the eye and shaking their hand. You want to
Hmm.
trust somebody. You want to feel good about the other side of the transaction, that somebody's there. It's not a bot. You're not going to put $1 million on a
Mm.
bot. Yeah, you want that human connection.
And maybe, Charlie, the last part of your equation, which is actually quite interesting because I would say reflexively, all salespeople that we've spoken to and been sharing this idea of the trusted advisor, all of
Yeah,
them recognize that this is the most important, yet they don't really know what to do about it, even though
yeah,
it's quite obvious. So this idea of self-interest,
yeah.
any comments or any thoughts around this?
Yes, that's in the denominator of the equation. So it kind of goes the other. The more self-oriented you are, the less
Mm,
people are going to trust you because you're in it for you. Um, and interestingly enough, the reason the trust equation became so popular, I'm convinced, was not the components of it, but the fact that one of the variables was in the denominator. And all of us who are sort of quantitatively inclined go, oh, that's interesting. This is not just A plus B plus C plus D. This is what does it mean when one goes the other way? We get curious about it. And I think it goes to the heart of sales. Let's go back to the sales situation here. At the very the reason trust in sales is so interesting is there's this inner conflict, and all good salespeople think, well, I want to do right by my customers. I want to be customer centric. I want to be buyer centric, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, if you in the back of your mind are thinking, oh, if I do this, that, and the other, then they're going to buy from me. Then I'm going to get the money. Then I'm going to get the praise. Well, that bleeds out of you, that attitude. You can't help it. If your goal, if your primary objective internally in your own mind is, I want to be successful, I want to get this sale, I want to have them give money to me, that's going to bleed through. So the real fix is to actually get yourself thinking, hey, forget that, rather focus on what can I do for this client, this company, this person? What can I do for them that would help them? And oh, by the way, if I do that, you know what? I'll probably make out just fine too. That's the
mm,
attitude you want to have in every little aspect of all the things that you do. If you're constantly focused on how do I make this better for the customer, and it will work out. The people who behave that way are people we like to buy from. I mean, who doesn't, right? Somebody who genuinely think about sitting around with your brother-in-law on a holiday afternoon watching TV or something, and you ask them for advice maybe because they know something about an area that you don't. They're going to tell you honestly. You're going to believe it. You're going to feel it because you can trust your brother-in-law, and there's nothing at stake here. You're not buying from him. That's how you want to feel like everybody's brother-in-law watching TV on a holiday afternoon. That's who you want to be. So your motives actually come into it. You can't engineer your way out of bad motives. That's one main thing I would say. It goes into another aspect, though, if I can mention. Fred, you mentioned before the bring a risky gift thing. You want to chat about that for a second?
Yes.
sure.
Customers are also fearful, just like we are. We forget. I know in professional services, for example, the clients that I have to tell all the CPAs that work for the Big Four, hey, your clients are afraid of you. And they go, what? Me? I'm just an accountant. But they are. You've got this prestigious brand name and degree, and you come in and they know you're charging gazillions of dollars per hour. Heck, they're afraid of you, and your job is to make them lighten up. So one way to do that is you take the risk first. There's an old saying, the fastest way to make somebody uh, trustworthy is to trust them first. We're back to trusting. One way you do that is you take the first risk. Rather than focusing on just being trustworthy, that's like, aggressively waiting for the phone to ring in sales. No, you place the call, you take the first risk. And one way to do that would be variations on the theme of, hey, listen, I'm only 27 and you're 50. You've probably seen this 20 more times than I have. But here's what I was thinking. Does this make sense? Or you let me know. So you put yourself out there and say, obviously you know more than I do. Or you say, I've been playing around, with this hypothesis and you've had more experience in this than I am. But here's what I'm thinking. Am I right? Help me out here. You take the first risk by saying, here's some ways in which I'm possibly ignorant, stupid, have the wrong idea.
Mm,
You tell me, what do you think? It's important that you do actually think about it in advance and have a reasonably intelligent hypothesis. It doesn't have to be right, but it does have to be disprovable. And if you can come up with something that's halfway intelligent, they'll be delighted to set you straight because it's a chance for them to talk and you to listen. Everybody likes to talk, everybody likes to be listened to, so set the table for them. Come up with an intelligent hypothesis, makes you look vulnerable, and lets them pontificate and you listen. And that's a good dialogue.
As we are thinking about the components of the trust equation, how do you see it's a broad question, so maybe we'll need to narrow it down. But how do you see AI playing across those four different elements? Where do you see it being a, a way to basically just deliver a better trusted conversations with customers
Yeah,
or better engagement?
that's a good question. I've never thought about it exactly that way. So let's stumble through this together, you guys. You can answer this as much as I can. But credibility, let's start
Mm,
with that. We all use, you mentioned before, a dozen times a day. We use it as Google on steroids, look up some data and
mm.
piece together. We talked before, you can do your own research with AI and it gets you a lot, makes you a lot smarter, more educated and so forth. So I think the sort of Google on steroids aspect of it certainly helps the credibility. The reliability thing, I don't know. While I think about that, what do you think?
Yeah, automation tools really with AI. So how does it
Yeah,
keep you reliable? Like reminders, grabbing information,
good.
make it's an enhancement for scheduling reminders and being consistent and actually doing what you say you're going to do. Many times people have great intent, but their habits are poor.
Yeah,
So you can leverage AI to really help you do what
yeah.
you said you were going to go do.
That's a good one. And that, most of the applications, the agentic stuff, has been focused around efficiency and getting more efficient at things like organizing your time. Perfect application for AI. I agree with you.
I also like meeting notes,
Yeah.
summaries. We
Yes.
would teach that. We've taught that for years just to give great points. We even teach little techniques like leave one thing out so the person you're sending it to adds
Right.
to it and starts to engage, right? There's all those little techniques. But the AI summaries in any of your meetings are
Yes.
really fantastic. They allow you to do things like summarize and follow up with your customer
Yeah.
much easier than in the past.
Agree. Very useful.
Another example that we had recently, which was very interesting, was the ability for whatever the GPT we were using was for basically being able to look at all the examples, all the case studies that a particular company had been working through with their customers when you would have never known that that was actually what the
Hmm.
company had been working on across the world. And suddenly you have not just two or three examples of what that company had done in that particular region, but 100 examples of the way the company had been able to help similar companies. And it was such an eye opener for salespeople because suddenly they realize, oh, actually, we've done tons of this.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. So I can go back to my customer and say, these are the 15 different case studies and customers we can actually reference back to you. So it was very interesting. Uh, and the only other way to have done that would have had to be able to plug into all those different stakeholders within the organization, which obviously I either don't know about or they don't know about me, and therefore they would never give me the light of day. So,
Well, let's see. Again, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I haven't thought of this particular question this way. It's like I think of LinkedIn on steroids. You can learn a lot about people, about
right.
companies, about histories, as you mentioned before, about relationships in the past, things that have been done. You can get a lot smarter about backgrounds and understanding where people are coming from, people's biographies, histories, corporate history, and ask good questions. And by good questions,
Mm.
again, I don't mean fill out the form that you're trying to or map out things out, but rather get people talking about what matters to them. You can be much more informed. Certainly, that's one thing that comes to mind. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the intimacy, especially with AI, it ties back into the credibility and research components. So many times I'll have conversations with people for the first time, but I've watched maybe 15 videos that were on the
Right,
internet about them either doing
right,
public speaking or at an event. And I can bring up and reference those and say, hey, last March I saw you on stage and you were
right.
speaking about this. Could you tell me more about it? Right. And
Exactly.
I'm very, very interested. And then not only am I demonstrating some intimacy with them and their perspectives, but I also reinforce the credibility components, which means I've gone and spent the time to learn more about you and
Exactly.
on the topic. So
By the
I
way, you
think,
also, in passing, you mentioned one of the key phrases. I like to tell people two or three word phrases that they can use. And you mentioned one of them, tell me more. A
mhm,
great phrase for conversations. Wow. Tell me more about that. That shows
yeah.
you're interested in.
Finally, self-interest. Any idea
Mhm,
about how AI can play in?
I think two things come to mind. One of them is use some of that research that we just talked about and share it with people. I've been playing around with AI and I've uncovered these ideas and these connections, but I'm not sure. What do you think? Use it as a basis for jumping off. Start with your hypothesis. Doesn't have to be right, just has to be intelligent, and ask for their take on it, their opinion. So that's one. And I think we also touched on this idea of role playing and collaborating and having conversations and practicing interactions. Do that and then share that with your customers. I was playing around with AI, trying to have a role play, when you and I were going to talk here, and it went in some interesting directions that never would have occurred to me. It went here. What do you think of that? So you can use it to rehearse, and you can also give me some feedback. Was I too self-oriented there, or what are some things I could have said to indicate greater interest with my customer? What are some opportunities I missed? It's if you do it right, it doesn't take a whole lot of, prompting is still basic English. Tell me
Mm.
how I'm doing in this conversation. How could I be more customer focused? Am I taking too much airtime, etc.? And it can be a good coach if you prompt it right.
It's very good. And so that kind of takes us to this question that we keep hearing from salespeople, which is, is AI coming for my job? Like, am I
Right.
going to get replaced? And I think both there were two interesting reports recently from both McKinsey and BCG saying yes, but no.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a little bit of this split screen of seeing AI being able to actually replace some of what salespeople can do and should be doing, but at the same time they cannot do a number of those things. So um, maybe I don't know whether Charlie, you want to have a go at this, or Bill. I'll let you decide.
He's at Microsoft. He's an old client of mine. He's now basically head of AI for all customer facing type stuff, I think. And a couple of years ago, when this stuff came out, he said, is AI going to take your job? He says, no, it's going to take the job of the guy next to you who didn't spend time learning how to use
Right,
AI.
right,
If you
right.
learn how to use it, you're going to be pretty good. And I still think he's right about that. Is it going to automate? McKinsey and BCG are right. It's going to automate a whole lot of things that lawyers are another one, who are at risk of getting hollowed out for all the stuff that they used to bill time for. But that doesn't mean lawyers are necessarily out of a job. It means you just need to up your game, and you got a great new tool to do it. So get on
mhm,
it. Get on the case.
yeah.
You're in charge of your own career.
I think it goes back to Fred and Charles. What I know we have been promoting for years. We're in skills training, right? Not information training, right?
Right.
We would teach someone how to read an annual report if they've never done it before, but
Right.
it's the skill of analyzing the report and saying where can I focus? Where can my products or services actually help where they have problems?
Right.
So the synthesis or the analysis, and I like to put it in a couple categories, right? Are you a critical thinker? Are you thinking critically? Are you
Yes.
trying to solve problems? And then can you make a decision, right? You
Yes.
don't want to leave any of those things to AI. You may want AI to enhance those, right? I
Yeah.
have a thought or a hypothesis. Can I put that through AI and see if there's feedback or other
Right.
research, right? Can I solve a problem? And maybe it'll point me in a few different directions, but I need to think critically about the
Right.
responses from AI because they're most likely not right, or maybe they are. You should apply them to your customer if you're actually intimate and understand their situation and decision making. Again, you don't want to leave that to AI. You need to take the information that you're gathering, think critically, and make a decision. So I think if
You
you
know,
have those three components, and obviously that all builds trust, but we've been teaching for 20 years those skills. So if you didn't focus on those types of skills and you're just passing knowledge, I think this came out in a few books and sales methodologies in the past, which is customers have access to information, and now they may have access to more information even
right.
faster. If
Right.
all you're doing is transposing a brochureware
Yep.
or what's on your website or the product training you received, and
Yep.
you're not thinking critically about how to present the information, you're probably going to get replaced by some type of automated bot, right? Because
Exactly.
that's
Right.
the value.
And
But if you,
that was already there
yeah,
before AI too. To some, if
yeah,
in the
yeah,
old days, you could walk in and say, "Well, tell me what your problems are." And even
right,
before AI, that didn't cut it anymore. You had to know something before you went in. If you go
yeah,
back to the beginning of our conversation, I asked you to let me put big picture context around two things: trust and sales. We talked about the trust part. The sales thing, remember I said there's being really good at what you do and there's being really good at understanding what your customers need and want. And what we're talking about now is the latter. And that's where the opportunity lies. It lay there even before AI, but especially now. The trick is not heavying up on the technical competence, Google on steroids, question answer. It's using this tool to get you better to understand more deeply what's going on with this customer, this business, this client, this person. And
yeah,
that's where the power of it lies, I think.
No, no, I was about to say it's a great way to kind of bring the whole concept home of, if you were to think about the way you engage with your customers, how you can potentially use those tools that are now available and not think of them as them replacing you, but more how do they augment you.
Yes.
It's a great way to actually put it all together and a great way to actually augment um, part of the trust equation that we're trying to
Yes.
basically go and improve upon. Um, and I think also this idea that we spoke about at the beginning is something that has been resonating a lot in the conversation that we've been having. This idea of the risky gift
Oh, yes.
is really something that has been resonating. So maybe we can speak about that a little bit, and then we'll kind of wrap it up
Yeah. Okay.
afterwards.
The analogy I usually, when I'm like giving a talk to people, I'll say, imagine this situation. You're invited out to dinner with a potential client you've never gone, and they invite you to their house. So that's moving up the level of personal relationship. You've never been to their house before. You don't really know them that well. So this is a step up in the relationship. And you and your spouse or significant other, whatever, you go there. What do you do on the way to their house? You stop and you buy a bottle of wine. That's the socially acceptable thing to do. It's kind of obligatory. You get zinged if you don't do that. But you don't get much credit for doing that. However, suppose you were to say, let's give a little thought to this. I think last year they went on vacation to Italy. What if we got them a really nice bottle of Barolo and tied it up with a ribbon the color of Italy's flag? That would show thoughtfulness, focus, and so forth. And why is it risky? Two reasons. Number one, maybe they're alcoholic. I don't know. You don't know. They could be. Or number two, maybe you got it wrong. Maybe they went to Spain. Well, do you then say, well, forget that idea. Let's just get a California red and be done with it? No, you go buy the Barolo because number one, if they are alcoholics, it's probably not the first time they've run into this. They'll say, that's very kind of you. We don't drink, but we'll save it for our next couple, or have some now. And
Thanks very much.
yeah, thanks
Yeah.
very much. If it was Spain instead of France, you make a joke out of it. You can get through it. The point is, you took a risk, knowing you might be wrong, and maybe, but you did it anyway, and it shows thoughtful. Even if you're wrong, it shows thoughtfulness, and that's what you want. That feeds into that intimacy, low self-orientation dynamic that is so important. So it's a substitute for the wine, to substitute a hypothesis, an idea, a theory, something that you have. You
Mm,
bring something of value. It might be wrong, but that's not the point. The point is not to be right all the time. The point is to selectively take a risk aimed at deepening something for the sake of the client. Your intentions will be clear. It's not that hard to make your intentions clear, and people will appreciate it. And again, the theory behind that, the dynamic is, if you want to make somebody trust you, trust them first. Because the
mm.
deepest thing we as people have is reciprocity. Good for good, bad for bad. You do good for me, I do good for you. You do bad for me, I'm suspicious of you. It works even with animals, how you approach a dog. If you're afraid of the dog, dog's going to bark at you. If you're not afraid of it, you pet the dog on the head, and it's all good. Reciprocity. So you take the
Right.
first risk. That's what Bring a Risky Gift is all about.
Yeah.
So maybe to bring this conversation to a close, even though we could go on for maybe
We could.
a few more hours.
Yeah.
But if you were to share, maybe we'll start with you, Bill, some of your final thoughts on this idea of the trust equation. How does that look like, work like, smell like in the age of AI? In a sales engagement, but more broadly in the way people interact, that would be great. And then, Charlie, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think the age of AI for me it's very exciting, and I understand some people's fears, but they need to overcome those fears and embrace it as an automation tool. And I think if they embrace it the right way, it'll reduce their fear, right? They realize that they can actually enhance it. Back to, it's always been a focus for me on differentiation and skills, right? Human skills and behaviors, the critical thinking, problem solving, decision making for me. And if you focus on that, you'll realize that AI is just a way to make you more efficient, help validate some components. So for me, it's very exciting. The concerning part is the confusion that's out in the marketplace that AI is going to take over the world, and people are thinking about all these jobs are going to be lost. That panic, it probably happens in every big phase of automation, right? When the internet came out, everybody was going to buy on the internet, and all the stores are gone. And things do change, but not as dramatic as they typically are portrayed. So that's my summation, which is double down on the same stuff we've been saying, which is double down on your skills, double down on knowledge of your customer if you're a salesperson, and then double down on the tools and your knowledge of the tools and not fear them. So that would be my summary.
Good. I like that.
Charlie?
I'll add two little more simple things on top. I agree with everything Bill just said. Said it very well too.
Thank you.
One is most salespeople are familiar with the phrase ABC, always be closing. One of the worst pieces of advice ever. Don't ever be closing. Instead, I like the ABC. Keep it, but call it always be curious. Curious is a wonderful virtue. Because if you're always curious, you're going to keep looking and keep trying to find out what goes next. What happened if I do this? What are they thinking about that? And by the way, it'll drive your self-orientation down to nothing because you're always focused on something else outside of you. So that's a great virtue. The other one, people often ask, what's the single best piece of advice for building trust? And I would have to say listening, but in a particular way, not quote active listening, or certainly not listening to find out answers to questions, but like I said before, listening so that the other person feels heard, appreciated, understood, recognized, valued. That's the effect you want to create in other people by paying attention. And you can't fake it. You have to work on being naturally curious, being other focused, but it works when you do it.
I love all of it. I would just add my 2 cents. There's a couple of thoughts that keep creeping up when we talk about sales and AI. The first thing is salespeople tend to forget that their customers have access to the same tools,
Yes.
and they can do the reverse. And they basically can be a lot more prepared in having those conversations that they have ever been. And so, how do you actually make sure that you prepare yourself for that kind of conversation? Because they are ready and they're
Mhm.
waiting for you. And they're waiting for you to actually have that conversation. And so, if you cannot have that conversation, that means you haven't done the work that both of you mentioned. You haven't paid enough attention. You haven't tried to build the intimacy. You haven't tried to demonstrate that you know about my business. You haven't done the work, but I've done the work on you. So now I'm prepared and you're not. And so what does that look like?
Right.
The the other thing which is quite interesting is it's not going away.
Right.
And this idea of wishing it away is crazy. Like the Pandora's box has been opened.
That's right.
There's not going back to a pre-chat GPT moment. And so you need to be ready, whether you're in sales or not, it doesn't matter. You need to be ready for the fact that this is here. This is part of the way we're going to be interacting with each other. So if we go back to your equation, Charles, I think then it becomes quite important to realize that it is not going away, and therefore we need to factor it in to those four different key parts of
Yes.
the equation. Um,
Good.
awesome. So we've now been talking about this for a good moment. So I want to I'm going to do the closing if that's okay with you guys. But
Sure.
I wanted obviously to thank both of you, Charlie and Bill, for your insights. Looking forward to doing a lot more of those conversations. Um, Charles, if you can give back again the books that you've written and maybe one book that you would recommend as well. I'm sorry, I'm kind of springing that on you,
No,
but
that's okay.
your couple of books and then maybe something that you would recommend that people that are interested in this topic would actually go and look into.
Yeah, the three books that I wrote, the Trusted Advisor was the more famous of the three.
Mm,
The second one, my favorite book, honestly, Trust-Based Selling. And I wrote a third book, co-wrote, called the Trusted Advisor Field Book, which is kind of a companion to the Trusted Advisor.
awesome.
And if I had to recommend another book, geez, here's one. It's an old book. It's been around 25, 30 years. Influence, the Art of Persuasion, or the Science of
Right.
Persuasion. Robert Cialdini.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everything in it, but he points out the importance of reciprocity and gets into how people become influenced by other people. Critical reading for salespeople, and very good. And I owe him a lot of credit for recognizing the role of reciprocity and trust.
Awesome.
Fairness. Not necessarily a book, but some of the readings, which I'm getting very into right now, is a lot of publications and videos of uh, individual Dr. Willard Daggett or Bill Daggett, and he created a framework. He's an expert on assessment and competencies, and he focuses on education K through 12. And I've been having conversations with him. But he has a framework for assessment around rigor, which Charles, you mentioned, which is extreme knowledge, right? It's a whole knowledge measurement around how rigorous do you understand the subject, and relevance,
Hmm.
which gets into your intimacy. And he has a quadrant D, which he discusses with AI. Many of the quadrants can be taken over by AI, except when you get to quadrant D, which is the top level of knowledge and understanding and relevance and application. So, can I be in a situation which many salespeople find themselves in, and I get asked a question that I've never heard before, and I may not know the answer to? How do you respond? And if you have the capabilities at quadrant D, you can actually respond in an intelligent way maybe starting with, I don't know,
I
never
don't
thought of that
know.
before,
Right.
right? But you have the confidence and you're at that level where you could actually have a spontaneous conversation that is respected and productive with the client.
That's great.
Now I've applied that in the corporate environment. He's only K through 12, so he doesn't apply it from a business perspective, but he has some really unique things which also have come out, which is the impact of not requiring K through 12 and even collegiate level students to think about application, only teaching knowledge and not how to apply it. So do I know the formulas in calculus? Sure, but what do I do with it? And there's a long history in the United States, primarily of not requiring application of the knowledge. And it's actually affected physically the brains, the hippocampus, the root of our frontal cortex is shrinking over time. And I'd love everybody to read about it because we need to challenge ourselves, be more curious, as you mentioned, Charles, and especially with this new workforce that's coming out, it's something to think about. So
Very cool.
I've got two books I'm reading right now. Both of them I love. One of them is Apple in China and how Apple has basically invested about, I think it's about $50 billion a year in building up China's capabilities and how that's killing the US manufacturing sector. So I think it's quite interesting. And the other one is called Burn Book, which is written by this journalist from the New York Times called Kara Swisher, who's been following the IT industry for a long time. It's quite a fun read.
It is. I've read that too.
I'm going to thank you both for this incredibly insightful hour that we've spent together. If all of you watching actually want to either subscribe or follow or comment on whatever place we've actually posted it, please do so. And we look forward to having a further conversation with Charles and Bill. So see you very soon.
Very good.
thanks, sir.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Charles.